Welcome to the Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. My name is Dr. Adriana Popescu. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and leader in the field of mental health, energy psychology, addiction, trauma, and empowerment. In this podcast, we will be exploring mental health from a variety of perspectives, from the spiritual to the shamanic and beyond. What if mental illness isn't everything we think it is? What if everything we see as a pathology is actually a possibility? What else is possible with mental health?
Hi, everybody. Dr. Adriana Popescu here with you today with another episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. I'm very excited to have as my guest with me today, Jamie Lee Silver. She is the creator of the Silver Lining System, where she offers clinical EFT tapping and matrix energetic sessions to people suffering from all kinds of loss. She discovered EFT shortly before her son tragically took his own life at the age of 22. To Jamie, grieving her son felt like standing at the top of a vortex that she could very easily fall down and never emerge from. Tapping saved her life, and she is now committed to helping as many grievers out of the vortex as possible so they can move from pain to purpose. Love this. Thank you so much, Jamie, for being here. Jamie Lee is our guest. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I always love to start our show off by finding out more about our guests. So, tell us a little bit about your story and how you have come to be doing this work that you're doing today.
Thank you for asking. Oh, goodness. Well, I was an empath from the time that I was a young girl, only I didn't know what it meant. I just absorbed everyone's emotions around me all the time and had, I'm going to say, a real battle with my emotions. And they were very overwhelming and very big to me. And it became something I sought relief from because in my heart, I knew that it was an internal battle that I could find my own happiness. And so I just became a seeker at a very young age. And I did Werner Erhard's work. I became a Buddhist, chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. And then the most delightful thing happened that had like the fulfillment of my every dream was when I became a mom to these two delightful boys, Aaron and Ben. Aaron came first, and Ben was my baby. And then for the next 20 years, really, I had a great career in sales. I loved what I did, but the highlight of my life was hanging out with my boys. That was the real deal. That was everything. And what we tried to do was to memorize like moments so that we would never forget them. And we have many of those. And they were athletes. And Ben was a singer and a songwriter and a poet, a lot like me. And he was a star runner, and so was Aaron. And in high school and in junior high, running became his everything. And if you've ever been a mother or loved someone young, you can see where they become a little unbalanced. That one thing becomes more important to them than anything else. And running was that for Ben. And he brought his team to state over and over. Downers Grove, Illinois really enjoyed their Ben Silver. I was definitely Ben Silver's mom. That's who I was. And he wanted a scholarship to college. And he got one. When he got to college, he was part of the team. He had a full ride scholarship, room and board, the whole 9 yards at an A1 division team, highest competition, and he couldn't run anymore. He just couldn't. Whatever, he'd run his body out in high school competing. And I watched the slow and sometimes not so slow devolution of my son's brain. And I know you have an emphasis here on mental illness. I saw it just parade itself right in front of my life. And despite 100% of my efforts every day, waking up, like, how can I save my son? What can I do for my son? It was a train wreck happening in front of my face. And it was right before this that I started tapping. Thank goodness. Because through my tapping was my release. And I actually even tapped on him, which helped him. And it's a dream of mine that somehow I can be impactful in the study or the help of what turned out for him to be schizophrenia. And then, yes, after 2.5 years of suffering, I say he gained his release because he wasn't suffering any longer. And I kept tapping and praying and chanting and everything I knew to do. And this wasn't part of my intro, but this is part of my life, that I continued tapping and decided to go to I thought at the time, and really the best school of EFT Tapping Institute, um, with Alina and Craig, that I'm sure you know of them. And I also, through I could feel Ben's life force. I could feel his release from the suffering that he was under from the minute he died. It was like, wow. And I took my pen to paper because I'm a writer and that's what I do. And I wrote to him, and through my hand, he wrote me back. And ever since then, he is always there whenever I write to him, ready to write me back. And it has given me relief from the darkest suffering, as has doing EFT tapping.
Wow. Let's talk about that piece for a moment. You're essentially referencing something called automatic writing. And for people who may not know what that is, can you explain that?
I sat down and I wrote to Ben, and I am very, there's words for it. I don't know the best word for it, but I'm very auditory. Singing, talking, I'm a public speaker. I love poetry, I love words, and I hear. And I wrote him, and I can read that passage or any other passage in the book I published. It's called Our Forever Ben, and it's one mom's letters to her son in spirit. And there's Ben. There he is. He was a little runner, and only 5'3", ran like the wind. And then I just listened, and without filtering, I write what I hear, and I just let it flow. I just write whatever it is. And sometimes, even reading it back that first time, it goes to one level in my consciousness. Then I go back to it and read it again, and it just gets richer with each reading. And I love the idea, Adriana, of not not having to look for a sign. It's like my signs are there whenever I want them. And it's the whole him. And I'm on this podcast right now because I think if more people knew how to do that, it would give them peace in their hearts too.
Yes. I mean, and you and I chatted about this before. I mean, when we look at these psychics and mediums who are, channeling or doing mediumship with spirits, beings who have passed, I mean, they have wait lists that are like a year, 2 years, 3 years long because so many people are desperate to communicate with their loved ones who have passed. And you and I both know that it can be far simpler than that. You do not need to have some special gift or talent. Anyone can be taught how to do these things in a variety of different ways. And so tell us more about how you do that when you work with people.
Well, it's a mixture of tapping and writing, because there's an element of being able to do it that is almost like release into the energetic flow, which doesn't, it's not as scary as it sounds. It's not scary at all. It's love. It's purest love. And when I do my sessions with people or workshops, we start with that feeling of the love for each person, just like I did with Ben. I just imagined how he wasn't unhappy anymore. But that core of energy that was who we are, and also the knowledge, and he tells me, confirms it, but I always knew it, that lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, that this love had always been so for us in various different combinations.
Yeah. I mean, I've always thought that the whole premise of love at first sight or even hate at first sight is usually the recognition. It's that soul recognition of, oh, I've known you before. And we've had this intense energy, sometimes really loving and sometimes not so much. But but that often it is coming from experiences that we've had. And I find that the bonds, even with animals, I've had certainly animals that I've just known, or I'll get visions of, my current cat at one point was my dog in another life. And I have a very clear picture of that in my mind and memories and things that will arise. And all of us have access to this information. We just don't believe that it's possible. So sometimes we have to work with people's belief systems that might be limiting their ability, because oftentimes, as someone who is identifies as a psychic and a medium myself, I hear the messages. I'm clairaudient. I can hear different spirits like trying, they're so desperate, they're trying to get the attention of their loved one who's still alive on earth, and they're like, hello, I'm right here, and they're not seen, they're not heard, the signs aren't picked up on, and they're just frustrated. And so then they might come to me like, can you help me get like through to this person? How can people become more attuned, do you think?
Well, there are many ways, and you may be more attuned than you think you are. I find this is really a natural expression of love. And the fear that's surrounding it, from that some people feel, I did not feel it, but the fear that some people feel of it's a wrong thing to do, or it's opening up something, etc. I find that's where the tapping comes in, meditation, prayer. I have people bring the pictures of their loved one. And for me, it's writing and tapping, writing a love letter to their loved one in spirit, which you can do today. You can write a letter to your loved one in spirit. And you can try this on your own. Of course, come to me who loves to teach if you'd like to, but try it on your own if you'd like to do that, and just see, it might just flow for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the tapping piece. I mean, most of my audience has some familiarity already with various forms of tapping. We certainly have had guests on the show that practice, whether it's TFT or EFT. But tell us a little bit about what tapping is and how it works.
Tapping is the gentle tapping of your fingertips on parts of your body where there are a lot of nerve endings, and it's also where the meridians flow. And it's very experiential. I can describe it to you. But many of my clients, when they come to me for tapping, after their very first, what we call round of tapping, where you say what the emotion is you're feeling, what the trigger is for feeling it, and where you feel it in your body. They'll say, I feel sadness at a level 10 when I think, and I work a lot with people who have regrets, the shoulda, woulda, couldas, if onlys, especially with suicide. It's endless what you can do to yourself if a loved one dies of suicide. And what happens after you say what the truth is, even though I feel this sadness and I feel it gripping my throat, thinking about that one time at the doctor's office where I wish I'd said X instead of Y. And then you go through this sadness in my throat, this sadness in my throat, this sadness in my throat. And then miraculously, after a few rounds of tapping, my client will look at me and go, I don't understand how this happened, but I feel so much better. I feel so much more at peace. And it's from that peaceful space that I find it's much easier to listen and hear what your loved one in spirit has to say to you, which brings even more peacefulness. I remember being it was a parent losing child, and it was all suicide support group. And every single person there was in agony about, I didn't get my note, or I got my note and I didn't like what it said, or this, that, the other thing. And I'm thinking, I get my note anytime, and how much peace that brought me, which again is why I'm here to speak with you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and to anyone who's listening.
Yes. So many offshoots here that I want to explore. Here's one that I think often doesn't get spoken about is specifically on the idea of grief. I find when I've worked with clients that many times they don't fully want to let go of their grief. They on some level, conscious or not, feel that if they hold on to it, it keeps them connected with their loved one. And of course, the idea, if we come along and say, hey, we have this tool called tapping and it can change things and it can help you feel less sad and less grief. But some people are actually resistant to that idea because they feel that they want to stay connected sometimes through the pain. Can you speak to that? Have you noticed that with folks?
Yeah, I have noticed that with folks. And I think people who deeply, deeply believe that, they're going to find their own way, but it might not be through this way. They'll, you really have to. And what I would do with somebody who came to me and said, okay, I want to be more present with my children and family members right now, but I can't because I just feel so bad all the time. We start where the truth is. And if they say, I feel like if I, lost this feeling of badness, sadness, that I would lose the connection, that's where we would start. Even though I feel like I'm going to lose the connection, and there's a part of me that feels scared to lose this sadness because I feel I'd lose this. And we would tap telling the truth about that. And after a few rounds, the energetic lifting of that would start if it were truly their desire. What do you feel? How would you approach that?
Yeah, the same way. I'd go with it's a fear, right? Usually. So what are you afraid of? And what if it's not true? And maybe going into tapping or using some other kind of tool that would assist them in releasing some of that fear. And also sometimes I'll ask the question, well, what do you think your loved one would want? Would they want you being this sad all the time? Would they want you just crying and in a dark room with the curtains drawn, or would they want you actually living their life? Right. And often that, will shift something in their universe.
Yeah, yeah, and I find it's very sad for people around people who love them to watch them just going down that vortex and not being able to get out. So I view what I do as that hand down that vortex. And that the people who really want to get out of it for their loved ones, for their self, for their health, will just take that hand and just say, okay, let's give this a shot and see what happens. I helped many people who have lost loved ones to suicide, and they've found that the relief that their body feels through working through this with EFT tapping and writing is life changing.
Well, because I also think, especially if you are the loved one of someone, like a mother, a partner, even the child of someone who has ended their life, how much of that person's pain and suffering were you already trying to carry, consciously or not? I mean, because I think that's what we do. We love someone, we see them suffering, we want to take away their pain and suffering, and we have that capacity, like many of us have that ability as healers to take someone's pain on. However, the problem with that, and what I often have to teach clients, is that's not really helping your loved one, because whatever's causing them to have that pain is continuing, and now you're in there, in pain also. Now you're both drowning. How is that helpful to anybody? It doesn't help you to take their pain and suffering away. So we also sometimes have to do some unpeeling and releasing of that which they've locked even into the body, that is actually not even theirs.
Oh, you make such a good point. It's so true. And also the caregiver aspect, like my identity as a human being was keeping my son alive. That was it. Every day, waking up, what can I do? And he, of course, got into there wasn't a place for him, the right hospital setting didn't exist, a place that would be right for him with his medications, et cetera, didn't exist. We couldn't find it. And but they're a huge part of who I was in the world when Ben was no longer here. It was like, whoa, you have to do some really strong internal work to get back to yourself, or back to yourself, your new self. It's different from your old self.
Well, that's the thing too, right? You are going to be forever changed by something like this. The idea that you could go back to who you were before, that doesn't exist, right? So I would imagine that some of the work with clients might be around that. Like, well, who am I now if I'm not Ben's primary caregiver? Who am I? Um, in a different context? Who am I now? And not just that, but who would I like to be? Because you don't have to. I can easily see where many people might fall into a victim kind of consciousness, around all this horrible thing happened to our family. I'm a victim of this terrible loss. Yes, you could look at it that way, but people can get stuck in that
Oh my
too.
gosh. And it can be actually deadly. And I credit my very strong Buddhist practice at the time with the philosophy of turning poison into medicine. That whatever bad happens to you, that you can turn it into something, which is why I'm here today, and why I lead a very happy life now. I have a very fulfilled life, and I want that for everyone who desires it for themselves. And I'm sure you feel the same way, Adriana, and that's why you created this podcast.
Well, yes, and to let people know that it's okay. Gosh, just in I am also a clinical director in a drug and alcohol rehab, and I'm thinking about a group I ran the other day where a woman was very much stuck in a grief process. It wasn't a death, but it was the loss of the custody of a child. She had lost custody of her child, and she was so stuck in the beating herself up and, like, what a horrible person she was and all the things. And it's almost like when she would have a moment of laughing or of joy, just living life, she would feel guilty about it. And so we were working on changing the beliefs that I have to suffer, right, for all eternity for what I did wrong or whatever my part was. Because, of course, um, with any kind of loss, suicide or otherwise, there's always, like you said, we always have some level of blame, self blame. Like, I should have done something differently, or I shouldn't have gotten mad at them. I should have this, that, or the other, or someone else should have this, that, and the other. And I think, giving permission, that's the term that comes to mind. It's like we have to sometimes teach our clients to give themselves permission to feel okay again. And then from feeling okay to actually feel good and to enjoy life and to be happy. Because I can see where many people earlier in this process would not be where you are now with it.
I love the way you put that. I love the way you put that. And I would add giving themselves permission to feel the way they feel, which is, I think, one of the greatest gifts of tapping. That after when you're in the flow of tapping and telling the truth about how you feel, I've had so many people turn to me and say, it feels so good to just let this out, because we tend to take our feelings like a big balloon and put them underwater, and maybe we're not even aware of them. But still, that balloon's gonna rise to the top, whether it's in anger at somebody who's innocent or something else. That balloon is just not gonna stay underwater, and what a safe way to come about it by saying, even though I'm, angry at the doctor or, whatever it is, it's okay to feel the way I feel.
And it's okay to be angry at the person who chose to leave also. I think sometimes people struggle with that one because they don't want to be upset with them. But I think it's really important in doing the healing work to express how angry you are, if you are angry that that person made that choice. Like, it's okay to feel upset in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and when you are recognizing that and tapping at the same time, it will lift in a way that's healing for everyone, which is like the key why we do it.
Hmm. I will also say, and this kind of takes it in another direction, I have also had the experience, again, being someone who's very attuned to these things, where a person who's no longer in a body, who's transitioned, may actually show up in one of my therapy sessions, to have a conversation. I call it family therapy with the dead, because it's happened over and over again where a loved one will show up to the session, and I get a chance to mediate a conversation that can provide a lot of healing, because sometimes there were things that were said that want to be apologized for. Sometimes things were not said that the person wishes they would have, either party, the person who's still alive and in a body, or the person who no longer is. And I've had some really profound, magical, miraculous things happen where people can make peace, in a way that they maybe couldn't when everyone was alive. And that often can allow the person who's been kind of hovering, hanging around, the earthbound spirit, if you will, is one term for it. Often it can give them the peace they need, to be able to move on into whatever comes next. And Barbara Stone, if you're familiar with her, she would do these workshops at the energy psychology conferences, and often do that and use tapping, use muscle test the person still alive, and when they had a being kind of around them or attached to them, they were doing tapping for that being so that they can clear their own conscious, or I was a terrible father and I feel bad about that, and I'm still feeling shame about this, that, or the other. And they would do the tapping for that spirit to then allow it to move on. I mean, it's really, really profound and beautiful work, all the different ways we can use this.
We're so fortunate. We are so fortunate. And in mine and Ben's case, it was just this love, um, that I find comforting. I do. I just so find it so. And people have asked me, Jamie, could you be making this up? What if it's not really Ben? And my answer to that is almost, does it even matter? If it's something that is bringing me such comfort, bringing others such comfort to hear about it, does it even matter? So,
Now, I do want to explore one more thing with you, which is you use tapping, and like, and I would say like an enhanced version of tapping that we actually haven't really covered on the show before, and I would love to get Alina and Craig on here to talk about it. Is this matrix
oh yeah.
energetics work?
Oh my gosh.
Can you? Yeah, I know you use this quite a bit. What is this, and how is it different from just regular EFT tapping?
It's it's so deep. Um, what it involves doing is working with your echo. And I work very closely with Kate Marilat, who wrote the book with Carl Dawson, who on matrix energetics and matrix reimprinting. And I find my favorite form is future and then past, and it's almost like a form of time travel, that you go to your future self as you imagine everything you want her to be, and in the setting that you want her to be in. And whether it's she's in the penthouse, she's giving a lecture to thousands of people, whatever she's doing, and you look at the future self, you stay separate from her. And then I asked my client, how do you feel in your body? Looking at your fully expressed desire, how you desire your future self to be. And that they may say, you know what, I feel nervous, like right in the center of my gut, looking at her in all of her glory. And it's like, oh, what a wonderful thing to explore. So we ask future self to send us back to a time in this lifetime and sometimes even beyond, where this being, like, made an unconscious or conscious decision that is somehow keeping them from being their imagined most beautiful self. And then we stay separate from, say, um, uh, going back to 5-year-old Nancy, let's say, when something happened with her mother. And we go into, it's a different form of tapping. This is how I do it. Other people do it tapping on every finger. Craig actually taught me this because, anyway. So we freeze everything going around in this scene, and we tap on that younger self. We introduce ourselves as present self come to help former self. And we tap on her where she is and what she's feeling, and allow her to fully express and let go of whatever intense emotion and belief that she's founded about herself from this situation. And also then bring in, we always resource ourselves before we go on our journey. Whatever they choose to, whether they want to bring their grandmother with them, or a spirit guide, or a parent who's passed away, or anything else, an angel, and bring that into this really holy space where we allow the younger being then to make it like, I'll just give you a for instance in my life, and that is that my dad really, they thought I was a boy. I was the second child. They thought I was going to be a boy. And um, so I go back to the nursery, and there I am, a girl, and I know my dad's disappointed. He's trying not to be. It's not like he's a bad person, you know. But then you ask the younger self what they'd like to change in this moment. And for me, I took down the welcome Scott sign and put up welcome baby Jamie Lee, and really worked to change the energy around what even as a young being I may have absorbed. And this is really this I believe this really on a cellular level has deep and lasting change. And it's such a pleasure to do because you're not personally feeling the emotions. It's your echo, it's your former self that's feeling those emotions, and then you're helping be the healer to heal
Hmm.
that former self.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, I often think of, and certainly, educate clients on how much those early life experiences really do impact everything. I mean, how we see the world, how we see ourselves, and usually the information, especially when it comes to the belief systems or BS systems, as my colleague likes
I
to call
love that.
them.
I think I'm gonna have to use that.
Yes, you can credit TJ Woodward, Conscious
Thank
Recovery.
you.
He came up with that one. But the BS that we come to believe at such a young age that is usually based on false information. It's, a child's naive interpretation that is usually, that's very egocentric. Well, oh, well, if this happened, it must be my fault, rather than understanding that, hey, maybe this is like someone else's issue and they were putting it on me, but it's not about me, and all the things. I think it's so valuable to do this work because often it feels, especially with traumatic or painful events that you experience at a young age, it overwhelms your ability to cope. And it's like someone just hits the pause button on that experience, and you just keep like, and then you keep replaying it over and over again in some form or another. Um, to create more pain and suffering. And when we can access that with modalities like this, and we can allow that child to get unstuck and off the loop and hit the play button and let it go all the way through, but with the love and support and understanding of a safe person, of your adult self, of a therapist or counselor, coach, whoever is there with you, like how incredibly healing that is,
Ah,
even miraculous.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Which brings me to what you're involved in energy healing modalities as well. But for me, one of the greatest gifts of tapping is how it gives you real access to change these beliefs and to think more clearly. Um, to realize, okay, she was just an empath. That, that was just part of her journey. Or helping my clients just realize they don't have to always be waiting for the other shoe to fall, because these are the things that we live life out of because they're deep in there. How wonderful to help an individual free themselves from that.
Yeah. Yeah. And for people to know that they can be freed, because I think that's the other big misperception again that tends to go with this kind of victim consciousness is like, I'll never heal from this, right? Like you hear this all the time when someone has lost someone. I will never heal from this heartache. I will never feel good again. I can't go on without this. But the reality is we can, and we can accelerate and deepen that healing process with these incredible tools. So, as we kind of bring this to a close, um, Jamie Lee, where can people find out more if they want to get your book or work with you or just find out more?
The best way is to send me an email at tap4 for happiness at gmail.com. Tap4happiness.com is my website. as well. I'm also Jamie Lee Silver on Facebook, and I am on social media. I know we'll have some other links to that.
We'll definitely put the links in the show notes for sure. And any final thoughts for us?
The underlying everything of all I do is helping you find the gift of grief and being able to turn grief into gratitude, like the purest form of gratitude. And I remember that the moment where the light bulb came on after tapping, after the work that I was doing for myself, that I realized I didn't have to have this being for 22 years that was my son Ben. It was like, oh my God, I got so lucky to have him. And deep gratitude looking at the pictures rather than that, oh my God. That shift is possible. Deep gratitude whenever I think about him. How lucky am I? And I want that for everyone.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Jamie Lee, for sharing your gift, your presence, and all that you're doing in the world. Thank you so much, those of you who have been listening and watching. Please do share this podcast with others, especially if you know of someone who might benefit from it. Do all the things for the algorithms: click like, share, review, rate, comment, all the things that will help us get this information out there in the hands of more people. Thanks again to Jamie Lee. Thanks to everyone, and we'll see you next time on Kaleidoscope of Possibilities.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Kaleidoscope of Possibilities, Alternative Perspectives on Mental Health. This has been Dr. Adriana Popescu. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe and share with others. To find out more about me, my guests, and more, please visit my website at adrianapopescu.org. See you next time.